It is a Tuesday or a Wednesday. The exact day doesn't matter. What matters is this. The temple courts in Jerusalem are full of people, and a man is speaking in broad daylight, and the crowd is reaching for rocks. Not metaphorical rocks, not theological objections. Rocks, heavy ones, the kind you use when words have run out, and what remains is only the oldest human response to something that feels like blasphemy. We will come back to that moment. We need to understand why it happened. But first, we need to talk about what is missing. If you have read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you know the parables. The prodigal son stumbling home down a dirt road, the merchant selling everything for one perfect pearl, the farmer scattering seed on 4 kinds of ground, hard, shallow, thorny, and good. Jesus was a storyteller of the first order, and the synoptic gospels preserve those stories with the kind of care you give to something irreplaceable. Then you open John, and the stories are gone. There is no prodigal son in John, no good Samaritan, no lost sheep, no hidden treasure, no 10 virgins with their lamps. Mark tells you plainly that Jesus never spoke to the crowds without a parable. John's gospel has none. Not a single one. For 2,000 years, most readers have moved past this without stopping. They assume John simply chose different material. They assume the 4 Gospels are 4 versions of the same thing, 4 camera angles on the same event, and John just happened to point his camera somewhere else. That assumption is wrong. This is not a video about which gospel is more accurate. This is not a debate about dates or authorship or which came first. This is about one decision, one deliberate, stunning editorial choice that tells you more about who Jesus claimed to be than almost anything else in the New Testament. John did not forget the parables. He replaced them, and what he replaced them with is either the most important thing ever written or the most audacious claim in the history of human literature. The crowd in the temple court has already made their decision. They are holding rocks. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. To understand what John left out, you first have to understand what a parable actually is. Not the Sunday school definition, the real one. The Hebrew word is mashall. It is older than the New Testament by 1,000 years. And mashall does not simply mean story. It means a comparison, yes, but also a riddle. A dark saying. A piece of truth wrapped so carefully inside a narrative shell that you can hold it in your hands without feeling its full weight until the moment it cracks open. That is not an accident. That is the point. When Jesus sits on a hillside in Galilee and tells the crowd about a farmer scattering seed, he is doing something merciful. He is handing people a container they can carry. The truth inside, that most people who hear the gospel will not keep it. That hearts can be hard as a road or shallow as rocky ground. That truth, spoken plainly, would scatter the crowd before they were ready to receive it. The parable holds the truth at arm's length. It lets you approach slowly. Matthew records the moment when the disciples ask Jesus directly why he speaks this way. Why not just say what you mean? And Jesus answers with something that has puzzled readers ever since. He says he speaks in parables so that those with eyes to see will see, and those without will not. The parables are simultaneously a revelation and a concealment. Open to the seeking heart, closed to the hard one. Mark goes further. In chapter 4, he makes a statement so sweeping it stops you cold. He says Jesus did not say anything to the crowds without using a parable. Nothing. Every public teaching in the synoptic tradition is wrapped in story. Here's what most people miss when they read that line from Mark. It means John's silence is not an oversight. It is a statement. Because John's gospel was not written for people approaching truth slowly from a safe distance. Clement of Alexandria, writing around the year 200, called John's Gospel the spiritual gospel, the pneumaticon euangelion, as distinct from the other three, which he said recorded the bodily facts. Clement understood that something different was happening in John, something more direct, more dangerous, and Irenaeus of Lyon, writing 20 years before Clement, gives us an even sharper reason. He says John wrote his gospel specifically to refute a teacher named Cerinthus, who was spreading a version of Christianity across Asia Minor that said Jesus and the divine Christ were two separate beings, that the divine Spirit descended on the human Jesus at his baptism and departed before the crucifixion. Cerinthus loved hidden knowledge. His followers loved layers, mysteries, secret teachings wrapped in symbol and allegory. John refused to play that game. If Irenaeus is right, and most scholars take him seriously, then John's Gospel is not a supplement to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It is a theological weapon, written with precision and urgency, to say something that could not afford to be misunderstood. Parables can be misunderstood. Parables leave room for interpretation. Parables let you walk away, thinking you grasped the story without ever meeting what lives inside it. John was not interested in that kind of safety. But it gets stranger, because what John gives you instead of parables is something no one in the ancient world had ever heard a human being say about himself. John opens his gospel before the beginning of time, not in Bethlehem, not with a genealogy tracing back to Abraham, not with an angel visiting a young woman in Nazareth. John opens with a line that would have stopped every Greek philosopher and every Jewish rabbi who heard it cold in their tracks. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Greek term John uses is logos, and if you know anything about the Greek intellectual world of the first century, you know that word carried enormous weight. The Stoics used logos to describe the rational principle holding the cosmos together, the mind beneath all matter, the logic embedded in existence itself. Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher writing in John's lifetime, spent his career trying to reconcile the Hebrew God with the Greek logos. John takes that word, beloved by philosophers, argued over for centuries, and says, "He became flesh. He lived among us. You could touch him. He got tired. He wept at a tomb. He bled." That is not an introduction to a collection of parables. That is a declaration of war on comfortable religion. And then, John does something Matthew, Mark, and Luke never do. He records 7 moments, 7 distinct scenes, where Jesus makes a direct, first-person claim using a construction in Greek that would have been immediately recognizable to every Jewish reader in his audience. Ego eimi, I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. In Matthew, Jesus might have told a parable about bread, about hunger, about provision, about a father who gives good gifts. In John, after feeding 5,000 people with actual bread, Jesus turns to the crowd the next day and says, "I am the bread. Not I brought the bread. Not I can give you bread. I am it. You are hungry for something you cannot name, and I am the answer to that hunger." You can feel the difference, can't you? A parable about bread leaves you thinking about the story. An I am statement about bread leaves you with a choice to make about the person standing in front of you. Now, before we go further, I want to ask you something. Of all the I am statements in John's Gospel, which one stops you the coldest? Is it number 1, I am the resurrection and the life, spoken to a woman whose brother has been dead 4 days? Or is it number 2, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," spoken to a room full of men who are about to watch him die. Type 1 or type 2 in the comments right now. I read every single one. Because here is what John understood. The foi, no parable could contain. Jesus was not offering a way of seeing the world differently. He was not providing a spiritual framework or a moral philosophy. He was claiming to be the thing itself. The bread, the light, the gate, the life. And John records every one of these claims without softening them into story, without wrapping them in metaphor, without giving you the comfort of a narrative distance. He hands them to you flat, direct, unavoidable. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because the three scenes John chooses to build his gospel around are not scenes of teaching. They are scenes of encounter. And in each one, the person who meets Jesus walks away changed not by a story, but by a direct collision with a claim. The first encounter happens at night. His name is Nicodemus. He is a Pharisee, which means he has spent his entire life studying the Torah, memorizing the prophets, arguing the finer points of the law with men who have done the same. He is a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council. He is, by every measure his world has for measuring such things, an educated man, a powerful man, a man who has earned the right to hold the opinions he holds, and he comes to Jesus at night. The Greek word John uses is niktos, in darkness. Scholars have argued for centuries whether this was literal, whether Nicodemus actually waited until the city was asleep to avoid being seen, or whether John is using night as a symbol, the way he uses light and darkness throughout his gospel. The answer, almost certainly, is both. Nicodemus came cloaked. Whatever his reasons, he did not want to be seen approaching this man. He opens with a compliment. He says, "We know you are a teacher come from God." We know. He has already categorized Jesus. Rabbi, teacher, perhaps prophet. He has a box ready, and he is trying to fit Jesus into it. Jesus doesn't let him. He doesn't tell Nicodemus the parable of the new birth. He doesn't say, "Let me give you a story about transformation." He says, "I tell you the truth. No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again." Direct, strange, confrontational. Nicodemus does what any honest intellectual does when confronted with something that doesn't fit his categories. He pushes back. "Surely you don't mean literally. Can a man enter his mother's womb a second time?" And Jesus, instead of backing down, goes further. Born of water and spirit, the wind blows where it will. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. And then, in the middle of this single private conversation, on a rooftop in Jerusalem, with one man who came in darkness to ask his questions, John records the most quoted verse in the history of Christianity. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." Not a parable, a disclosure, spoken quietly, to one man, in the dark. Nicodemus does not respond. John records no answer, just the words, hanging in the night air. And you are left to sit with them, the way Nicodemus must have sat with them, unsure what to do with something that large. The second encounter happens at noon. She has no name in John's Gospel. She is identified only by her history and her location, a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. She has had 5 husbands. The man she is with now is not her husband. She comes to draw water at the hottest hour of the day, noon, when no one else is there, which tells you everything you need to know about her relationship with the village women who would normally gather at the well in the cool of the morning. She is avoiding people, and she finds Jesus sitting on the stone lip of the well, alone, tired from traveling, with no bucket and no rope. He asks her for water. She is startled. Jewish men did not speak to Samaritan women. This was not social awkwardness. It was a boundary as hard as stone. And she says so. How is it that you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And Jesus says, if you knew who was asking, you would ask him, and he would give you living water. He does not tell her a parable about thirst. He does not construct a story about wells and longing, and the difference between water that satisfies for an hour and water that satisfies forever. He offers it, directly. And when she presses him, give me this water so I won't have to keep coming here, he tells her everything she has ever done. Not in accusation, in recognition. And here is what John records next. What most readers rush past without stopping. She goes back into the village. This woman who has been avoiding people, who came at noon specifically to escape their eyes, goes back and says, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did." She becomes the first person in John's gospel to bring others to Jesus. Not a disciple, not a rabbi, not a member of the Sanhedrin. A Samaritan woman with a complicated history, changed not by a parable about living water, but by the person who claimed to be it. Pay attention to this, because the third encounter is the strangest of all. A man sits by the road outside Jerusalem. He has been blind since the day he was born. The disciples see him and ask Jesus a theological question. Whose sin caused this, his or his parents? They want a framework. They want a category. They want, essentially, a parable about suffering. Jesus gives them mud and spit instead. He makes a paste from the dust of the ground, the same ground God used to form the first man, and he puts it on the blind man's eyes. Then he tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man goes. He washes. He comes back, seeing. And before all of this happens, before the mud, before the healing, before the argument with the Pharisees that follows, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." Action is the sermon. The healing is the I am statement made visible. John has replaced the parable not just with a claim, but with a claim backed by an event that can't be explained away. The man born blind does not fully understand who healed him until the end of the chapter, when Jesus finds him again and asks, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man says, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus says, "You have seen him. He is the one speaking with you." And the man says, "Lord, I believe." 4 words. No parable could have produced them faster. Now we go back to the temple courts, back to the crowd, back to the rocks. It is the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the great pilgrimage festivals, when Jerusalem fills with people from every corner of the Jewish world. The temple courts are loud with argument, alive with theology, crackling with the kind of energy that gathers when serious people disagree about serious things. And Jesus is teaching, publicly, without a parable in sight. The argument with the religious leaders has been building across several chapters of John. They have questioned his authority. He has claimed to be the light of the world. They have challenged his testimony. He has told them their father is not Abraham, but the one who opposes truth. And now the exchange reaches its razor's edge. They say to him, "Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? Are you greater than the prophets who died? Who do you think you are?" Here's the part nobody tells you. That question, in its original context, is not contempt. It is genuine theological crisis. These are men who have memorized the Torah since childhood. They know the prophets. They know what it means to invoke the divine name. And something about this man is pushing them toward a conclusion they cannot accept. Jesus answers them. He says, Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. They almost laugh. You are not yet 50 years old, they say. How have you seen Abraham? And then he says it. 4 words in English, 3 in Greek. Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was. Not I existed before Abraham. I am. The present tense, the burning bush. The name God gave Moses at Horeb when Moses asked who he should tell the people had sent him. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I am who I am. Exodus 3, verse 14. Every Jewish scholar in that courtyard heard exactly what Jesus said. There was no ambiguity, no parable to retreat into, no metaphor to offer as an escape route. A parable about being God could be dismissed as poetry. A direct ego eimi, alone, without a predicate, in the first person, in the present tense, could not. They picked up rocks because they understood him perfectly. This is the open loop John planted in his first chapter and has been pulling tight ever since. The Logos became flesh. The light came into the world. I am the bread, the gate, the shepherd, the resurrection, the way, the vine, and now, stripped of every metaphor, standing in the open air of the temple courts. Am. John records no explanation, no editorial note, no parable to ease the landing, just the words, and then the rocks, and then Jesus slipping away through the crowd. 3 chapters later, he stands at a tomb. His friend Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. 4 days, which matters because the Jewish tradition of the time held that the soul hovered near the body for 3 days before departing finally. 4 days meant past all hope. Even the body's family had stopped hoping. Martha meets Jesus on the road before he reaches the tomb. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Not I will raise him. Not I have power over death. I am the resurrection itself. I am the life itself. These are not things I do. They are things I am. And then, and John gives you this without warning, in 2 of the shortest words he ever writes. Jesus wept. He stands at the tomb of his friend, and he weeps. The one who just claimed to be the resurrection, and the life weeps over death, as if it is still his enemy. Because it is, and because the grief of the people around him is real, and because the Logos who became flesh feels what flesh feels at the edge of a grave. No parable in all of human literature carries what those 2 words carry. Augustine of Hippo, writing his Confessions in the late 400s, describes the moment he finally crossed from philosophy into faith. He had read the Platonists, he says. He had found in their writings something very like John's Logos, the rational principle, the divine mind, the word that underlies all things. But he says this plainly, I did not find there that the word was made flesh. The philosophers gave him the concept, John gave him the person, and you can spend a lifetime reading concepts about God, about truth, about the divine, and remain exactly where Pilate stood, because Pilate is the final figure John places in the story before the cross, and Pilate's exchange with Jesus is the longest recorded conversation between Jesus and a Roman official in all 4 Gospels. Jesus tells him, everyone who is on the side of truth listens to me. And Pilate says, what is truth? And walks away. He does not wait for an answer. He is standing in front of the one who said, I am the truth. And he asks the question and leaves before it can land. John records this without comment. No parable, no explanation, no editorial note telling you what to feel about it. The irony is the sermon. Pilate asked the right question to the right person and could not bear to stay in the room long enough to hear the answer. And John trusts you completely, to feel the weight of that without being told how. That trust is the whole gospel. The Greek word pisteuo, to believe, appears 98 times in John. 98. And every single time it appears as a verb, not a noun, not a static possession you carry in your pocket. A verb, active, ongoing, repeated. A choice you keep making every time you stand at the edge of what John has shown you. John doesn't want you to hold a belief. He wants you to keep believing. Those are not the same thing. So here is what John's gospel leaves you with. 3 things. And the third one is the one that will stay with you. The first is this: John did not forget the parables. He made a choice. His gospel was written, as he states plainly in its final chapter, so that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. That is not the goal of a teacher constructing a curriculum. That is the goal of a witness placing evidence in front of a jury and asking for a verdict. Parables instruct. John's gospel prosecutes. The second is this: a parable gives you distance. It lets you appreciate the story without committing to the person at the center of it. You can love the story of the prodigal son without it demanding anything of you today. But John's gospel does not offer that distance. Nicodemus had to decide what to do with "you must be born again." The woman at the well had to decide what to do with "he told me everything I ever did." Martha had to decide what to do with "I am the resurrection and the life," while her brother's body was still in the tomb. And you have to decide what to do with 98 instances of the word believe used as a verb. The third is this, and I want you to sit with it. Every other gospel writer wrapped the truth in a story so you could approach it at your own pace, in your own time, with your own defenses still mostly intact. John tore the wrapping off. He handed you the thing itself, unguarded, undiluted, direct. Which means the question John's gospel asks is not "what does this mean?" It is not "what did the scholars say?" or "what does the theology suggest?" or "what is the most defensible interpretation?" The question John's gospel asks is simpler than all of that. It is, what will you do with it? If this video made you stop and think, if one moment in John's gospel has ever stopped you cold, tell me which one in the comments. I want to know. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone who is asking real questions about faith. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. We are just getting started. The Word became flesh. John saw it, and he wrote it down so you could not look away.